Bandits set her home ablaze, and in the flames, a secret far darker than fire itself was revealed. A truth so terrible it could silence an entire town. Tonight, you'll hear what she carried in her heart, the burden of a widow who had nothing left but 2 children, 1 loyal horse, and a secret no outlaw could steal. Stay with me for just 1 more minute, and I'll take you into Dust Valley, where every shadow hides betrayal, and where a mother's courage rewrote her fate. How does a story like this make you feel? Share your thoughts in the comments, tell me where you're watching from, and may your day be filled with peace, strength, and hope. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss the next story of love, loss, and redemption beneath the western sky. The valley stretched wide, a sea of dust and fading gold beneath the last hours of sun. Dust Valley was no lush haven. It was bone-dry earth, cracked into patterns like broken pottery, brittle grass whispering in the evening wind, and a sky the color of ash and rust. Every gust carried grit into the lungs. Every creak of the windmill sounded like a tired sigh from the land itself. The town that bore the valley's name was little more than a scattering of wooden buildings pressed into the soil, each with peeling paint and weary porches that sagged under the weight of years. Horses pawed at dry troughs, and curtains fluttered weakly from windows like flags of surrender. Martha Hale stood at the threshold of her weathered farmhouse, staring at that horizon where sun and earth bled together. She was 35, but hardship had pressed years onto her face, fine lines etched deep from too many days in the wind, too many nights without rest. Her auburn hair, once full of fire, now fell heavy and dull against her shoulders, threaded with strands of gray. Her figure was lean, almost gaunt, held upright not by strength, but by a kind of stubborn dignity. Her eyes were green, pale, and piercing, but tired, the eyes of someone who had been forced to become both father and mother since the day the soil claimed her husband. She pressed her palm against the doorframe, rough wood beneath her skin. Behind her, the sound of small feet scuffling broke the silence. "Ma?" Clara's voice, thin, careful. Clara Hale was 9 years old, with a face that carried more shadow than laughter. Her hair was a pale honey color, tangled from neglect, and her dress had been patched more times than Martha could count. The girl's eyes were wide, cautious, as if every sound might signal danger. She was protective in ways a child shouldn't need to be, holding close to her brother James whenever the wind howled. James, only 6, came tumbling after her. He was slighter, with dark hair that curled at the edges, always falling into his big brown eyes. His cheeks were smudged with dust, his shirt threadbare, but he still carried some spark Clara had long set aside, the occasional laugh, the curiosity that made him wander into trouble. Tonight, though, he stayed close to Clara, clutching her sleeve. Martha turned from the horizon, smoothing the fear from her face. "Inside now," she said, voice firm. "Storm's rising." They retreated, and she followed them into the dim kitchen where lantern light fought the dusk. The house smelled faintly of smoke and dry earth, the way it always did, as though the land itself clung to them. On the wall, an old photograph still hung. Her husband Thomas, straight-backed and smiling, one arm around Martha, the other resting on the mane of his chestnut Mustang. The horse had outlived him, and still pawed at the corral outside, rusty, loyal, and restless, as if waiting for a rider who would never return. Outside, the wind shifted. Martha moved toward the barn with a bucket, routine her only defense against despair. She pushed open the door, lantern swaying, shadows thick in the rafters. The smell of hay and leather greeted her, along with Rusty's low, impatient snort. She set the bucket down, running her hand along the horse's warm flank. His coat gleamed dully in the lantern light, chestnut fur marked by a white blaze down his nose. He had eyes that watched her with something dangerously close to human knowing. She bent to fetch fresh straw, and there, tucked between broken planks at the stall's base, her hand brushed something stiff. Paper. She pulled it free, heart hammering. It was a torn scrap of parchment, edges curled, ink faded. Words bled through. "If they come for it, hide. Don't trust." The rest was illegible, but one name struck her like a blade. Thomas Hale, her husband's handwriting, his mark. Martha froze. The barn suddenly smaller, shadows pressing in. Thomas had taken many secrets to the grave. She had believed it was sickness that carried him, nothing more. But this was proof of something darker. Rusty shifted, stomping once as if echoing her unease. Back inside, Clara and James had fallen quiet near the fire. James fiddled with a carved wooden toy horse his father had made years before, worn smooth by small hands. Clara sat watching Martha, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand it. "Ma," Clara whispered, "folks in town say bad men been seen near the creek." Martha stiffened. She had heard the same rumor, half-drunk voices muttering outside the saloon, a band of thieves hiding in Dust Valley, waiting to strike. She had dismissed it, until now, until this note. The lantern light flickered, throwing the children's shadows long against the wall. She pulled them close, brushing dust from their hair, pressing her lips to their heads. "Don't be afraid," she said. "We're safe here." But the words felt brittle in her mouth. The night deepened. Stars burned cold above the valley, wind rattling loose shutters like bones. Martha sat alone by the window, the parchment folded tight in her hand. Her chest felt hollow, her breath uneven. For a moment, she thought she saw Thomas's reflection in the glass, the outline of his jaw, the glint in his eyes. But when she blinked, it was gone. Rusty whinnied suddenly outside. The sound was sharp, urgent. Martha rose, heart lurching, and stepped onto the porch. The valley stretched dark, silent, except for the steady thud of hooves. From the edge of the moonlit road, a lone rider approached, his horse's silhouette cut against the pale dust, cloak snapping in the wind. He slowed near the fence, then reined in before the house. Martha's hand tightened on the doorframe. Clara stirred in the doorway behind her, James clutching her skirt. The rider lifted his head. Even in shadow, Martha felt the weight of his stare. Familiar, dangerous, unreadable. "Evening, Mrs. Hale," he said, voice rough as gravel. And the night, already heavy with secrets, grew heavier still. The man on horseback did not move quickly. He sat tall in the saddle, his silhouette sharp against the thin moonlight, as though he had all the time in the world. Martha's breath caught, her hand tight on the doorframe. She could hear Clara's small gasp behind her, James clinging to her skirt. The stranger swung down from his horse with the careful weight of a man used to long roads. His boots struck the earth with a dull thud, stirring a puff of dust. "Evening," he said again, his voice low, ragged like gravel pulled across stone. "Name's Elias Mercer." Martha's eyes narrowed. She'd heard the name before. Thomas, her husband, had once spoken it in passing, the way men mentioned comrades who had carried them through gunfire and whiskey nights. That name now felt like a hand reaching from the grave. The stranger stepped closer into the light spilling from the lantern. He was about 40, tall and broad-shouldered, but lean in a way that spoke of endurance, not comfort. His face was weathered, jaw shadowed with stubble, a faint scar cutting across his cheek like an old map line. His eyes, dark, restless, seemed to hold secrets too heavy to share, and a weariness that suggested he had long ago stopped expecting kindness from the world. Martha held her ground, chin lifted. "You should state your business quick." Elias's gaze flicked past her toward the children. His voice softened. "Not here for them. I came with warning. Dust Valley ain't safe tonight." The words hung heavy. The wind picked up, rattling the loose tin on the barn roof. Martha's throat tightened. "Say what you mean." "There's a band of men moving this way," Elias said. "Not the kind you can reason with. They're after something buried here long before your husband died, and they'll tear through anyone standing in their path." Clara shifted, eyes wide. She looked up at her mother, lips parted, but said nothing. Martha felt James's hand squeeze harder into her dress. Her pulse quickened, though her face remained stone. "You knew Thomas," she said quietly. Elias nodded once. "Served beside him. He trusted me. Once." The silence stretched. The lantern flame trembled. Martha felt heat in her chest, grief mingling with suspicion, with the sharp sting of betrayal hinted at in his voice. "You expect me to believe you've ridden all this way just to play savior?" Elias lowered his eyes for a beat. His hands, rough and scarred, tugged at his gloves. Then he looked up, straight into her. "No, I didn't come clean. Not yet." Later that night, while the children drifted to uneasy sleep, Martha stood by the kitchen table, her hands folded tight. Elias lingered by the doorway, a shadow cut against the lamplight. "He never told you?" Elias asked. Martha's voice was sharp. "Told me what?" "That he kept something back from them, something they want now." She froze. Her husband's hidden. Letter in the barn flashed through her mind. Ink faded, the warning unfinished. Her fingers dug into the table's edge. "Clara," James's sleepy voice mumbled from the other room. "Don't leave me." Martha's heart softened just for a moment. She stepped away, pulled a quilt over them, stroked their dusty hair. For one breath, the world shrank to the sound of their breathing. For one breath, she remembered Thomas's laughter filling these walls. Then Elias's voice came again, cutting that softness in two. "They'll be here before long, and when they come, they'll think you know." Because Thomas was Hale. Because Hale never walked away from a deal without making enemies. Clara stirred, awake now. She had crept close, her small feet bare against the wood floor, her hair tousled from sleep. She stood half-hidden behind the door frame, but her ears caught words never meant for her. Something buried, something wanted. Her father's name tied to danger. Her face paled. She clutched her brother's toy horse in her hand until her knuckles whitened. Martha turned sharply to Elias. "You talk circles. Speak plain." Elias's shoulders rose and fell. His next words came flat, heavy. "I betrayed him." The room stilled. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. "I left him when he needed me most, chose my own hide over his. That's the truth." Martha's chest constricted. She felt her stomach drop as if the floor had given way. She saw again the day Thomas's body was lowered into the earth, her children's hands clutched in hers. She had believed his death was cruel chance, fate's indifference. To hear now that betrayal had been part of it, rage surged, grief twisted, her voice cracked like breaking timber. "And you dare come here." Elias's jaw tightened. His eyes, though, did not flinch. "Because I'll not run this time. If I can't change the past, maybe I can change what happens next." The lamp hissed, wick burning low. Outside, Rusty pawed the ground, snorting uneasily. Martha's breath came shallow. Her hands trembled, but she would not let them see. For a heartbeat, silence swallowed them all. Then, a sound. Hooves. Dozens. A rhythm that thundered faint but steady through the valley's brittle night. The horizon flickered orange. Faint firelight danced like the edge of a storm. Martha's eyes flew to the window. Elias stiffened. "They're coming," he said. The children stirred awake, fear rising like smoke. Martha pulled them close, her heart hammering in her chest. In the distance, the valley seemed to breathe heavier, dust trembling as though the land itself prepared for invasion. And in that moment, she knew. The shadows pressing in on Dust Valley had only just begun. The valley woke in firelight, not dawn but torches carried by men who had no place under heaven's mercy. The dust rolled before them in gray sheets, hooves pounding in grim rhythm. Shadows stretched long against the ground, warped and restless like wolves pacing at the edge of a campfire. From the farmhouse window, Martha saw them first. Dark riders spreading like ink across the pale earth. The sound arrived next, low rumble, then thunder, then shouts torn ragged by the wind. Her throat dried. She gathered Clara and James, pressing them back into the corner, while Elias leaned against the doorway, jaw tight, hand flexing near the revolver at his hip. The riders swept into Dust Valley like a storm without rain. At their head was Silas Crow. He was 45, but life had carved him deeper than years should. His hair was black, threaded with gray, tied back with raw hide. His mouth curved always in something between a sneer and a smile, as though cruelty amused him. His coat, long and dark, trailed like a shadow. His boots shone with dust and blood alike. His eyes, narrow, sharp, moved with the patience of a predator who knew time itself bent to his hunger. Silas reined in before Martha's house, horse stamping, breath smoking in the cold night. His voice carried like a whip crack. "Martha Hale," he called, "you've got what belongs to me." Martha's hand went cold on the children's shoulders. Elias muttered, "Stay quiet," but his own stance betrayed unease. The men spread, dismounting, stomping through the yard. Barn doors were wrenched open, windows rattled with fists. Dust clouded as boots struck dry earth. Silas watched without hurry, one hand on his reins, the other stroking the handle of a pistol. He dismounted finally, boots sinking into the dirt with calm menace. He approached the porch step by step, each slower than the last. His eyes locked on Martha's face through the lantern-lit doorway. "You remember me?" he asked. Martha stiffened. No words came. Silas chuckled low. "Course you don't, but your Thomas did. He and I had dealings. Big ones. He swore loyalty. Then he swore lies. And he thought burying gold would bury me." The words tore into her. Thomas's ghost loomed between them, not as a memory of love, but of choices that now threatened to swallow her children whole. Clara clutched her brother tighter, her thin body rigid. James whimpered, muffled against his sister's arm. Rusty, tethered near the barn, reared suddenly, eyes rolling white, hooves slamming dirt, as if he too felt the past clawing into the present. Silas's men prowled like scavengers. One reached for the barn latch again. Clara's gaze darted there, panic flaring. Without thinking, she darted forward toward Rusty, whispering his name in a broken plea. "Martha!" Elias barked, but too late. The thug moved to grab the child. Rusty lashed out, hooves cracking against the man's chest. The sound was brutal, a thud like timber splitting. The outlaw collapsed, groaning in the dust. Clara stumbled back, heart hammering, Rusty's breath hot and wild in the night. The yard froze for a heartbeat. Then Silas laughed, sharp as steel scraping stone. "Ah," he said, "the beast remembers me too." Martha's chest heaved. Her children were inches from ruin, her horse moments from slaughter. Elias had his gun drawn now, but Silas was already raising his hand. His men stilled, weapons cocked, the night thick with the weight of blood waiting to spill. Silas's voice turned soft, cruelly soft. "Your husband kept secrets, Martha Hale, and if he's dead, then you keep them now." He stepped onto the porch, boots creaking against the boards. His coat brushed the doorframe. He smelled of sweat, iron, and smoke. Elias moved, but Silas was quicker. His revolver cleared leather in a single fluid motion, barrel cold and gleaming in the lamplight. He pressed it against Elias's temple. Elias froze, muscles locked, breath shallow. Silas's mouth twisted into something like delight. "You'll speak, widow. You'll tell me where he buried it, or I'll paint these walls with your friend's regrets." Martha's knees threatened to give. She looked at Elias, his scarred face tight with rage and shame, and felt the children's fear trembling through her own bones. The dust outside seemed to thicken, choking the air, every sound too sharp, every shadow too close. Her husband's note burned in her pocket. Its broken words clawed at her mind. Hide. Don't trust. She had never hated Thomas until now. Never hated him for leaving her with riddles, for chaining her to dangers she had no hand in. Her lips parted, breath shallow, and in that fragile silence, Dust Valley itself seemed to hold its breath. The yard was still trembling from Silas's threat when the night split open with silence, sharp, suffocating, worse than gunfire. The riders lingered like vultures, their torches throwing restless shadows across the broken fences and dry earth. Clara clung to Martha's dress, trembling so hard Martha felt the shakes through her own bones. Elias stood stiff as stone, Silas's revolver cold against his temple. Then Silas lowered the gun, not out of mercy, but out of calculation. His eyes flicked dark and deliberate toward Martha. "You'll find it for me," he said, voice steady as a noose. "Your man left a trail, and you'll follow it, or watch your children bleed." He snapped his fingers. Two men pulled James away from Clara's arms. The boy's cry cut through the air like a blade. Martha lunged, but Silas's boot shifted, blocking her path, his sneer curling into something wicked. "Not yet," he said. "We'll take what's ours when the time's right." He shoved James toward one of his riders. The outlaw's hands, thick, scarred, reeking of sweat and leather, clamped around the boy's shoulders. James's small body twisted, feet kicking in air, his voice desperate. "Mama!" Martha's world constricted. Her chest burned as though every breath might shatter her. By dawn, the riders were gone, leaving smoke, broken boards, and silence behind them. James was gone, too. Martha stood in the middle of the yard, the dust still unsettled. The horizon lay heavy with gray, neither day nor night, as though the valley itself mourned with her. Clara pressed close against her, silent tears streaking her cheeks. Elias leaned against the porch post, face drawn, blood crusted where Silas's gun barrel had scraped his temple. Where would he start? Martha's voice cracked low, half to herself, half to Elias. Elias looked away, into the dying embers of the rider's firelight. His shoulders sagged. There's only one place Thomas would have hidden anything worth risking this for. Martha's eyes narrowed. And you know it. He nodded once. The garden. They moved in silence. Clara carried a lantern, its flame shivering with every breath of wind. Martha gripped a spade, her palms raw. Elias followed, his limp barely visible but real, a scar of battles fought long before tonight. The old apple tree loomed at the edge of the property, twisted and half dead, its branches reaching like gnarled fingers into the paling sky. Beneath it, weeds had grown thick, roots tangled deep. Martha fell to her knees and began digging. The soil was hard, stubborn, clinging to the blade of the spade. Sweat trickled down her temples, though the air was cool, her breaths harsh and uneven. Clara held the lantern low. Its glow painted Martha's face in gold and shadow, catching the tears she would not let fall. At last, the blade struck wood, hollow, muffled. Martha froze, her chest tightening. She scraped faster, dirt crumbling under her nails until a small chest revealed itself. Iron corners rusted, wood swollen from years underground. Her hands trembled as she lifted it free. She pressed her ear to its surface, as though it might whisper answers from the man who left it. "Open it," Elias said, voice rough. She hesitated, then pried the latch. It snapped open with a brittle groan. Inside lay two things: a revolver, iron eaten by rust, and a bundle of cloth wrapped around half-burned parchment. Martha lifted the map. The edges were blackened, corners crumbling, but enough remained. Jagged ink lines, a path leading to a canyon marked only by a crude X. Her stomach turned cold. She recognized it. The abandoned mine, long sealed after men died in a collapse years ago. Her husband had been there, and so had Silas. Clara's eyes grew wide. "Mama, is that where James is?" Martha folded the map tight. "It's where we'll find him." The silence stretched. Elias shifted, guilt tightening every muscle in his frame. His voice, when it came, was low, uneven. "He trusted me with that map, Thomas. But when the bullets came, I didn't stay." Martha's head whipped toward him, eyes blazing. "You left him." His jaw clenched. "I chose myself, and it killed him." The words struck harder than any blow. Martha staggered back a step, rage flooding her veins, grief burning hot. Her husband's death had always been a wound. Now it bled anew, rawer than before. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The lantern flame flickered wildly. Martha's breath came in short, ragged bursts. She wanted to strike Elias, to curse him, to drive him from the valley, yet James's cry echoed in her mind. "Mama!" Her rage turned to steel. "You'll make it right. For him. For my boy." Elias bowed his head, silent, but his eyes glimmered with something close to resolve. The wind shifted. Rusty neighed sharply, ears pricked. Then, the sound. Hoofbeats again. Martha's blood froze. She pulled Clara close, hiding the map under her coat. Elias raised the rusted revolver from the chest, testing its weight. Out of the gloom, Silas emerged once more, slower this time, as though he knew the soil itself bent to his will. James dangled before him, one arm clutched tight in Silas's grip, the boy's face pale, streaked with dirt and tears. Silas's smile was lazy, cruel. So the widow digs deep. He dropped James hard onto the dirt, just long enough for Martha's heart to lurch with hope. Then his boot pressed down on the boy's back, pinning him like prey. Silas leaned low, eyes locking with Martha's. His voice carried no rush, only venom. "Bring me the map to the mine, tomorrow, or the boy never breathes again." The torchlight carved his face into something less than human, more than monster. He yanked James up again, tossed him toward his men, and swung into the saddle. "Remember," he called, pulling the reins. "One night, one chance." The riders turned, thundering back into the valley's dark throat. James's terrified cries trailing in the dust. Martha dropped to her knees, fists sinking into the soil still warm from the chest she had unearthed. Clara wept beside her. Elias stood rigid, shadows cutting deep into his scarred face, and the night closed heavy around them, carrying only the echo of Silas's promise. Bring the map, or lose him forever. The canyon loomed before them, black as an open wound against the pale dawn. The abandoned mine crouched at its heart, timbers sagging, earth split and scarred where men had once clawed at the mountain for its riches. Wind funneled down the gulch in hollow whistles, carrying the smell of stone and ash, and the echoes of ghosts who never left. Martha dismounted, boots sinking into the gravel, her breath sharp in the cold. Rusty stamped and tossed his head, uneasy in the narrow pass, nostrils flaring at the scent of men hidden in shadow. Elias slid down after her, slower, his hand pressed to his side where blood seeped through his shirt. His face was drawn, gray, but his eyes burned with a grim fire. "We shouldn't be here," he rasped. Martha gripped the revolver, her husband's gun, worn smooth by another man's hand, heavy with memory. "We don't have a choice." Her gaze lifted to the mine's yawning mouth. Somewhere inside, James waited. The thought of his small voice crying in the dark made her chest tighten until she could barely breathe. She swallowed hard, pressing the fear into silence. They advanced. The air thickened, silence broken only by the crunch of their steps and the creak of old timbers. Then, from the shadows, voices rose, rough, jeering, thick with menace. Silas Crow stepped into the half-light. His dark coat swept the ground, his face carved cruel by the lantern flames swinging at his side. Behind him, half a dozen outlaws grinned like jackals, rifles glinting. "Martha Hale," Silas drawled, his tone thick with mockery. "The widow brings herself to the wolf's den." His eyes flicked to Elias. "And you, still breathing. Surprising." Elias straightened, wincing, but said nothing. Silas chuckled. "Where's the map?" Martha's fingers dug into her coat pocket where the parchment lay folded. She didn't move. "I came for my boy." Silas's smile sharpened. He lifted his hand, and two men shoved James forward. The boy stumbled, his face pale, lips cracked, eyes wide with terror. "Mama!" His cry split the cavern's breathless dark. Martha nearly broke. Every instinct screamed to run, to clutch him, to drag him away. But Silas's pistol was already leveled, steady as stone. Then came the first twist, a faint rustle in the rocks behind her. "Clara!" Martha's stomach dropped. She caught a glimpse of tangled pale hair, a small body pressed against stone, eyes too wide, too afraid. The child had followed her, defying her command, slipping silent as a shadow. Her breath caught. No, not both of them. Clara froze as Silas's gaze flicked toward the noise. For a heartbeat, Martha thought he'd seen. But Rusty, restless and stamping, shifted at the same moment, his hooves striking sparks from the stone. The distraction pulled Silas's eyes away. Clara pressed deeper into shadow, unseen, for now. "Bring me the map," Silas said again. His patience thinned, his tone like wire pulled taut. "Or you leave with nothing. Not the boy, not your life." Elias's voice cut through. "You don't want the map." Every eye turned. Silas's narrowed. "You want the gold," Elias said, stepping forward, one hand pressed to his wound. His breath came shallow, but his words sharpened. "But Thomas never left you gold. He left you graves." Silas's pistol shifted. His men muttered. Elias smiled faintly bitter. "You think I don't know? I watched him die because of it. And I let it happen." Martha flinched. Her rage flared, but she understood. He was buying time. And then Elias did what Martha never expected. He charged. His revolver barked, a shot cracking the air. Chaos erupted. Men shouted, gunfire echoing off stone, sparks raining from ricochets. Elias staggered, a bullet tearing into him, but he kept moving, firing wild, drawing the wolves onto himself. "Run!" he shouted, voice breaking. Martha's world snapped into pieces. James stumbled toward her, terror in his eyes. Clara slipped from her hiding place, darting across the rocks. Rusty screamed, rearing, hooves striking, scattering men in a frenzy of dust and fury. Martha pulled James to her chest, then spun. Silas stood clear, his revolver steady, his smile sharp as ever. End of the road, widow. Her hand rose, trembling, but the revolver was in it. Her husband's revolver, the cold iron weight of memory and grief. Her finger curled. She fired. The bullet struck true. Silas staggered, eyes wide, blood blooming on his coat. His pistol slipped from his grip, clattering against stone. For a breath, silence fell. Then he laughed, low, broken, triumphant. His other hand lifted, clutching a small box wired with crude caps and sticks of dynamite strapped to the beams above. "You think you've won," he gasped. "No one leaves this mine alive." His thumb slammed the trigger. The roar came instantly. Explosions cracked the mountain, fire and thunder shuddering through the timbers. Dust cascaded, rocks groaned, beams split like bones snapping. The ground heaved under their feet. Clara screamed. James clung to Martha, sobbing. Rusty reared again, eyes rolling white, nostrils flaring as stone rained around them. Martha's heart pounded, blood rushing in her ears. She stared at Silas, crumpled but grinning, his face pale in the flickering firelight. The mine shuddered again, timbers breaking, darkness swallowing, and the mountain began to fall. The mountain groaned like a dying beast. Rocks split, timbers snapped, dust swallowed every breath. Martha's arms clutched James and pulled Clara close with the other, her body driving them forward through the trembling dark. Rusty charged beside them, ears pinned, nostrils flaring, his chestnut coat streaked with grime. Behind them, the roar of collapse grew, swallowing Elias's final shout, burying it beneath the thunder of stone. The tunnel shuddered. A beam cracked overhead. Martha ducked, dragging the children beneath her arms, shielding their heads. The revolver, her husband's revolver, slipped from her grip, vanishing into rubble. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Go. Her voice tore through the chaos. Rusty surged ahead, a flash of muscle and instinct, clearing a path through falling debris. His hooves struck sparks on stone, guiding them through the choking dust. At last, a sliver of light appeared, not golden, not soft, cold dawn streaked with gray, but it was enough. With one final lunge, they broke free. Outside, the morning air hit like salvation. Martha stumbled onto open ground, lungs burning, arms wrapped tight around James. Clara pressed against her hip. The mine's entrance roared behind them, coughing smoke and stone into the sky. Rusty reared and screamed, his cry echoing across the valley like a war horn. Martha fell to her knees. The children clung to her, coughing, sobbing, alive. She pressed her lips to their hair, dust coating her mouth. Tears streaked her cheeks, cutting pale rivers through grime. But Elias did not follow. Her eyes fixed on the black mouth of the mine. Dust billowed like a shroud. Somewhere beneath that weight of earth, he lay silent. He had chosen it. He had given her this chance. Her chest ached with something beyond grief, an understanding that redemption sometimes came not in words, but in the price a man was willing to pay. Hours passed. The valley shifted from trembling chaos to quiet ruin. Smoke lifted in torn ribbons, exposing the wreckage of timbers and rock. Martha rose at last, weak but steady, and led her children toward the remains of the mine. She didn't know why, perhaps to find a sign, perhaps because leaving without one felt like betrayal. Near the collapsed entrance, her boot struck something half buried in ash. She bent down, brushing aside soot with trembling fingers. A shard of gold gleamed faintly, no larger than a coin. Her breath caught. It was not wealth. It was proof. Thomas had hidden what little he found, not for greed, but for love, for them. To keep Silas from using it, to shield his family from men like wolves. Martha closed her hand around it. It burned warm against her skin, as if carrying his voice. "I chose you over gold." Rusty nudged her shoulder, his dark eyes steady, ears flicking toward the valley. She turned. Claire and James stood together, small figures against the vast stretch of Dust Valley, their hands linked tight, their faces streaked with ash, their eyes too old for their years. She pulled them close. "We're still here," she whispered. Her voice broke, but it was enough. When they returned to Dust Valley town, whispers spread before them like wind through dry grass. People emerged from sagging porches and dim saloons, their eyes wide, their voices hushed. They had seen the fire in the canyon. They had heard the echoes. And now they saw her. Martha Hale, dust-stained, children at her side, horse behind her, eyes unbroken though rimmed with grief. No one spoke her name at first, but then a woman at the well, gray hair wrapped in a scarf, whispered it. The widow of Dust Valley. The name carried, first as a murmur, then as a tide, until every corner of town held it. Not in pity, not in rumor, but in reverence. Martha kept her chin lifted, though her heart trembled. She had not sought to be legend. She had sought only to keep her children breathing. But sometimes survival itself carved legends from ordinary bone. That evening, the valley lay quiet, as if exhausted. The sky burned soft with sunset, orange bleeding into purple, clouds like torn banners above the land. Martha sat on the porch of her home, Clara asleep in her lap, James curled against her side. Rusty grazed nearby, his silhouette strong against the fading light. She turned the shard of gold over in her palm. It caught the last of the sun gleaming like a spark of memory. She thought of Thomas, of Elias, of all that had been lost and all that had been saved. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe without flinching. Her eyes lifted to the horizon. The wind carried cool and gentle now, not cruel. Shadows stretched long, but they did not frighten her. She whispered into the twilight, "We are safe, for now." The words were fragile, but they carried weight. They were a promise to her children, a vow to herself, and a warning to the valley, because safety in Dust Valley was never forever, but for tonight, it was enough. In Dust Valley, a widow stood where fear once lived. She carried her children through darkness, not with gold or guns, but with the strength of love and the courage to endure. From Martha's journey, we are reminded that true treasure is not buried in the earth. It is found in the family we protect, the sacrifices we honor, and the faith we carry through every storm. Even in the harshest desert, hope can bloom if the heart remains unbroken. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to know. Where are you watching from tonight? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss the next story of love, courage, and redemption beneath the western sky.